Well, we thought our chat with Eels GM of football, Mark O'Neill, was going to be our final podcast of the year, but footy and Parramatta are dynamic entities, and we've been given the opportunity to talk with three directors of Parramatta Leagues Club before Christmas, and there was no way I was going to pass up that opportunity. So to discuss the year that was, the future for the blue and gold, and what's happening across the Leagues Club group, I'm pleased to be joined by Richard Foda, Joy Cusack and Darren Adam. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Craig.
So let's get into the footy first. It was a tremendous season for the Parramatta Eels. What was that ride like for you and for the Leagues Club?
Well, I think it's best typified by Townsville, the trip up there for the grand final qualifier. I think Mark touched on your previous podcast that we had gone past week 2 finally, and up in Queensland, that point at which we were down 20-12 and our season could have gone either way. And I think you brought it up in your previous podcast 2 years ago, we fell in a heap against Souths. I think that moment showed that we've learned over the last 2 years and gave us a lot of hope for the grand final. The week was interesting, it was a fantastic ride, we've learned a lot from it. I'm looking forward to 23.
That night, you were up in Townsville. We were here in the Cumberland Throw in Jack's. There was the event outside. It was pandemonium here, the excitement in the club. I mean, that was really the home of the Eels. Yeah. You know, everything about that night, Parramatta Leagues was the home of the Eels that night. You know, it was a tremendous feeling. And of course, we had that through the year, didn't we?
Well, every game day, this place just sort of exploded. And what amazed me was the number of people that travelled from interstate for the games. Yes. And especially when we got into the final area, I sat with one of them and he'd driven from the Sunshine Coast all the way to attend the game here.
Yeah.
And others said that they were Queenslanders and they were heading to wherever the matches were going to be played because they wanted to be part of it, and it's a great thing. And if we transition then to after Townsville, how did the club respond? Well, the staff absolutely went beyond everything that was possible. I went round and said to them, what are you doing on grand final day? Well, I'm going to be here, of course. And, you know, they said, this is history, we want to be part of it.
Yes.
Now, irrespective of the fact that we didn't become premiers, well, we've always got next year. But the other thing was, it was history making.
Yeah.
And you couldn't find it. Everything was put down on grand final day here. It was just awesome. And the lead up, the club was just pumping.
Yes. I got to meet a number of people, particularly from Queensland during the year, and then in grand final week, we had people that came up to our podcasts here in Jack's during the year to introduce themselves that were listeners from Queensland, and that was amazing. And then I know there was a family from Queensland that I'd got to meet during the year, but they were given a family experience inside the club for the day. They were guests of the club, which was great. I got to meet others that came down. Yeah, it was just a phenomenal year from our perspective, and you know, it's great for yourselves as well.
I think what was fantastic as well was the whole club as well. So the experiences that you can have within CommBank Stadium, but as you've proven this year as well, people could come back here once again to the club, experience the game, win, lose or draw after the game, catch up with you guys, but also have a drink and a meal after the game, and it became the home of the Eels again.
And how great was it to make legend players available for people to meet?
Even Neville Glover.
Yeah, oh mate, Neville was one of the most entertaining guests that we had. It was brilliant, and what I won't forget is that there was unfortunately the match where we got hammered by the Broncos.
Yes.
And it was a Thursday night, and the rain was pouring down, and the room was filled with a lot of Broncos supporters after the game. Our Steve Ella was our guest, and when we finished talking to him, they all queued up for a photo and a chat with Steve Eller and talking about, what a favourite player he was of theirs. Broncos supporters just looking for that opportunity to speak to a legend of the game. It was great.
Steve Eller is a gentleman,
Yeah.
a pure and utter gentleman, and when he says anything, it's from his heart.
Yes.
He doesn't just say it to promote himself.
Yeah. So what excites you, if we're keeping in this football space, and maybe also, around what Paraleagues does on football days, what excites you most about 2023?
I think two things. One is the experience we've learned through the last couple of years, not just this year, but our players through this year and the last couple of years. So they'll be able to build on that next year. Players like Will Penasini really only in his first year of first grade, so seeing what he can achieve next year. And then the influx of talent both on the field but also off the field. I mean, you touched on it yesterday with Mark. The coaching team that now are joining Brad for next year will bring new ideas. They're already having an impact on the training field right now. So people like Trent Barrett, we've got Nathan Brown with the Pathways. I think it's really exciting times for an influx of new ideas to build on what we've already been building on in 2022 and beyond. Yeah,
it is interesting watching that dynamic of the coaches. I think it's a very good staff that's been assembled around the footballers. And speaking of what's happening up there, that development up at Kellyville, I mean, that's a major project that the group is going to be involved in. That'll surely be a game changer.
I think it'll also be great for the women's game as well, right? I mean, if you think about what those ladies achieved in just their second season, where Dean can take them to, but I mean, that's going to be a facility that will give them a home as well. So for the juniors, the women, as well as the men's team, so because they're a little bit orphaned at the moment in terms of where they have to train sometimes. So
that's right.
And I think they're looking at around that May, June, if all things are going through as expected to kick off construction up there.
And I think the best thing of that is that it will start on the community centre, so it'll be something for everyone in the Hills district to start with, and the home of the Eels, the headquarters there, will start after that.
And we've talked about match days, and I often see all of you before, during and after matches, even up at Kellyville. How important, I mean, this might seem an obvious question, but how important are the Parramatta Eels to Paraleagues? And then there's a second part to this question, because often people aren't too sure about this. What's the difference between the football board and the Leagues Club board?
Sure. So I can start sitting on both boards. The Eels are central to the purpose of the Parramatta Leagues Club. It was created by Jack many years ago as the purpose for the Leagues Club, to support the Eels. So it's still central to our purpose to this day. There are two different boards, as you may know. There's a Leagues Club board, which Joy, Darren and I sit on. There's also an Eels board that must act in the best interests of the Eels. And Mark Jenkins and I sit as PLC representatives on the Eels board. So while they're two separate boards, they're part of the one group, and we leverage the best of both to support the Eels and also the group.
So there'll always be two Leagues Club directors on the football board, but they have two separate constitutions.
That's correct. And so when we sit on either board, we're acting in the best interest of that organisation when we're talking about matters around the board table.
Okay. Now, just talking about still the football operation side of things, Paraleagues have an annual grant that goes to the Parramatta Junior Rugby League and its associated junior clubs, and that makes up quite a part of the community funding that Paraleagues is involved in. Now, on the weekend, I was at Westmead at the Maris Brothers setup over there that the Parramatta use for their pathways, and there was the internal trials that were held for the development squads. There was something like 142 players, and this is just in the male space, and I'll get to the female space in a moment, but there was 142 male players, young male players, 14s, 15s, 16s, representing 16 different junior clubs in the Parramatta district. Seeing that spread across the catchment, that must provide tremendous satisfaction for the leagues club, for the funding that goes into the junior leagues.
Absolutely, not just the 16 that were there on that day, but the 28 clubs that we support across the Parramatta district. I think it's fantastic. It gives an opportunity for, as you said, boys and girls to get involved in any sort of football. So whether it be the tackle, rugby league, touch or tag, it's fantastic to see everyone giving an opportunity and ultimately becoming Parramatta Eels fans as well.
And hats off to the people that were organising the day, because at the same time there was the SG Ball, the Harold Matts and the Tasha Gale trials at Goulburn, and on the same day, needing staff, and of course all the staff that was needed for 142 players at Westmead. It was, you spoke earlier, Joy, about the Leagues Club staff that were jumping in and getting involved on grand final day. The work of the Pathway staff is phenomenal as well, to be able to stage two major events on the same day with all the players involved.
I think Joey Grime is a good example of that. I wonder whether we actually have two, one in a cupboard somewhere for days like that, and he goes down to Goulburn, the other one comes out to Parramatta Morris. But they're all incredibly hardworking, and they give a lot of the time beyond what they're remunerated for.
Yes, yeah, they certainly
the
do.
Volunteers. It's fantastic.
Well, I've just spoken about the boys' space, and I indicated I was going to talk about the girls' space as well. But there were specific Leagues Club grants that were directed towards female pathways and programs, the clubs that are running programs. What sort of a growth area that is for the game at the moment?
Huge, absolutely enormous. I mean, the fact that it's actually getting attention on Fox Sports and on commercial TV highlights the fact that there's a huge demand out there for the game as a product. But our girls, I'm incredibly proud of them. I mean, they are pure ambassadors for the game. When you hear Samaima and you hear Kennedy get up and talk, they recognise that they're creating opportunities for the next generation that they never had themselves, where they actually sort of could play as young girls but then had to give up and go off and do other things for a while before they could come back. So the potential for that game is absolutely enormous, and it's such a pure product from an NRL, from a rugby league perspective. I think it's brilliant.
And of course, you know, we were talking about the experience here being home of the Eels for home games, and the NRLW is still within that sort of restricted season, but it's going to be tremendous when it gets to the stage where they can get into home and away games. Yep. And every week they can be part of the celebrations that happen on match days at Combank Stadium. Yep. Now, I touched on the community grant, so you can see I'm trying to get a bit of a segue here with each thing, but now I want to talk about community grants in general, because John and myself were here recently. There was the Christmas dinner for all the community groups, all those partners. Now, even there were bonus grants handed out on the night, which was something else. There was a lot of anticipation who were going to be announced getting those bonus grants. What sort of funding goes to community groups? What have you been looking at in the last 12 months or the last few years in terms of the size of the grants?
Obviously, it was COVID impacted in 2020 and 2021, but we were still able to give something in the order of about 800,000 in both of those years. It's north of $1 million this year, and we'll see that in an audited set of accounts early in 2023 when they get published for members. But all entailed something like 2.7 million over the last 3 years that have gone to various community grants. And what we've done in the last 12 months is sharpen the focus on what is core to our purpose. So we have an acronym of SPORT, which essentially is junior sport, but also physical activity that benefits our members and the people of the Parramatta area. Yeah, and
there was quite a diverse group, diverse community groups that were represented on the night, which was eye-opening. I mean, there were education groups, as you mentioned. There was sports groups and clubs, welfare groups. Yeah,
It was really very good, because it was an opportunity for all those organisations to learn about the other organisation and start sharing.
Yeah.
Right? My background is in community and fundraising and things, and you do not focus on I'm going to be everything to all people, because you need collaboration and participation.
Yes.
And it was really nice to see two education areas sort of introduce themselves to each other and start to take off from there. So that's all good for Parramatta Leagues, because we're directing the community to say, well, you've got to be more collaborative, you've got to share. You don't have to be all things to all people.
And these are, in the main, fairly small organisations, so the more they can learn from each other, the better that they will be in collective as well.
Well, I love the direction on the night where we were told, go and sit at a table with people you don't know.
It wasn't hard.
And you would have heard Phil Sim, our other director who chairs our community committee as well, talk a lot about how we've really sharpened our focus just in terms of what we'll fund as well. So rather than just committing to spend a certain amount almost out of obligation, really focusing on where we can make sure we're getting the biggest social impact.
Yes.
And that's dollars as well as what we've been talking about, connecting the groups together so that we can sort of help promote them beyond just the funding we give them.
Yeah, some of the I was thinking about some of the stats that were presented on the night about the number of hours that people volunteer from these groups to their communities. It's phenomenal. You know, I mean, they make communities go round, don't they? You know, volunteers. Imagine a world where we didn't have people volunteering their time or committing to projects that help people.
That's why at Parramatta Leagues we've introduced this year staff volunteering.
Yep.
Right? And that is enormous. And it also exposes our staff to what all these community groups they volunteer for, what they're doing. And then we can sort of say, well, the value add that our staff are adding to that organisation, we can actually cost it and value it and put a dollar figure on it. And I kid you not, it's going to be enormous.
Well, we were really quite pleased when we were invited to go along to Ronald McDonald House.
Yes.
And have a look at the executive staff involved in preparing and serving meals for the children and the families there. Any visit to Ronald McDonald House, it impacts you for a start, and you can only imagine how it impacts people who volunteer and feel like they're doing that. And again, volunteers, that, you know, it's so important.
I had the honour of doing the same thing last year, just before COVID shutdown happened, and just to see people being grateful for a meal being served by someone else that they didn't have to make themselves. It's a small thing to do, but it makes such a difference in their lives.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of construction going on around the club.
You can probably hear
at the moment. Yeah. So there's, if people are picking up a bit of a background noise, we are sitting out on the balcony of Jack's, and a bit of construction that's going on. So a lot of that seems to be in that dining space. But can you talk to us about what's happening in the way of developments here at the club?
Yeah, so we've got quite a bit happening. I mean, obviously one of our biggest developments, and we've touched on it in the past, was be spending about $7 million in what today is Eels Lane, basically building an alfresco dining area. So it'll seat, you know, probably about 160 to 180 people, depending on final configuration. As I said, that's a big investment. That's around $7 million for us. The first stage of that, we'll see Legends downstairs is actually closed, and we've spent about $1.5 million in terms of upgrading the kitchen, but also actually creating a casual dining space downstairs. Because one of the strongest pieces of feedback we've had from members consistently throughout our time is that there's not that casual lounge type area in the club. It's a sort of bistro, tinger or gaming areas. Yeah. So we're actually listening and responding to member feedback, and we're creating that sort of casual lounge, casual dining area with a brand new restaurant, brand new coffee shop downstairs, and ultimately, as I said, that alfresco sort of dining space outside. In addition to that, we'll build a covered walkway from the car park into the club. So a bugbear for many, many people is obviously on wet weather. You've actually sort of got to hustle along over the pavers into the club and try not to get too wet on the way. And we'll also be constructing effectively a walk of fame along there that'll basically be a paved area with recognition of some of the Eels legends along. So all up, there's about $10 million worth of investment that we'll spend across.
Which is quite an investment, and I guess as well, from what you were saying, the message to members is give feedback to the club. Yeah. You know, whether it be through the organised surveys that you that you send out from time to time about member experience, but just if members are talking to yourselves as directors around the club, or even football match days or what have you, that developments are based on what member requests and needs are.
Well, the management team and the board are here as custodians of their club.
That's right. We're here to serve the members, right? And that's why each year we've had a member meet the directors type night, both here as well as at Vikings, because Vikings is obviously an important part of the group as well. We've just spent $400,000 on renovations there to improve member experience as well. So it's all about what members want and need, that we can find the right way to use our funding for.
And the other thing with Vikings is the investment we've made there is coming back in many dollars. It's just been really terrific to see that investment provide a good return.
Well, there's something that I'm interested in now, because I'm a resident in the Hills area, and I've been reading about this proposed amalgamation with Dural Country Club, and there's a member vote that's going to happen in January. But
18th of January.
Okay, but can you talk to us about what's the benefit of Parramatta Leagues joining with Dural Country Club?
Yep. So, how long have you got, Craig? So, look, I mean, Dural Country Club is a really fantastic opportunity for Parramatta Leagues Club. If you look at all of the large leagues clubs, and we're obviously one of them, we're consistently in the top 10, they all recognise that there's importance to scale, and they achieve that in clubland through amalgamations. Dural is a fantastic club. It's situated up on Old Northern Road. You may have been there, but it was heavily impacted by COVID. So pre-COVID, they used to turn over around $3 million a year. Through COVID, obviously they had the shutdown, patronage fell away, and they just didn't have the cash reserves to come back from it. So, they haven't been able to do some of the basic repairs and maintenance. They haven't been able to run promotions, and so their turnover is now less than a quarter of what it used to be, and they just can't find their way out of it. So from an investment perspective, it's a great opportunity, right? I mean, the land and buildings and everything there's worth around $8 million. Net asset we would get out of that if the amalgamation goes through would be $5 million after clearing off their debts. But the opportunity for investment is fantastic. I mean, we can return that club to what it was and better than what it was before. But for members, what does it mean? It actually means they get access to a range of facilities that we just can't offer here. So it's a club that's got a lot of land. It has a couple of bowling greens, it has bocce courts, it's snooker, it's got a lot of sub-clubs like fishing clubs, things like that. And so it allows our members, and recognising that we've got over 8,000 members in the hills, like yourself, a facility that's in the hills that's close to them. It's close to the $60 million investment that's happening at Kellyville as well. And it gives member facility there, but it also gives people that come to Parramatta and come to Vikings the opportunity to go up there and use those facilities, the function centres, the bowlings that we just can't offer at the current premises we've got.
So like Vikings, it'll still be known as Dural Country Club?
Dural something.
Yeah, so we recognise that the local identity is important. We'll set up an advisory committee with the club and consult with them on any changes. They themselves have a view that country club doesn't necessarily reflect what that is. I mean, its origins were it was originally going to be a golf course, and that's what people often can associate with country clubs. But certainly preserving the local identity is critical, the same way as it is at Vikings, because it will be a different offering, the same way that Vikings is a different offering than what we've got here.
So whether it's the Dural Club or Dural Community Club or something like that, it'll retain that identity for their area.
Absolutely.
You've got to do that when you merge, or amalgamate.
Yep.
You've got to sort of keep some sort of semblance of what was there before. Otherwise, you just annoy the hell out of.
Well, I think you retain what
members.
works, and you refresh what needs to be refreshed according to what members want.
And it's also very important that Parramatta Leagues looks at amalgamation, because if you take a leaf out of Mounties have gone in and identified opportunities and gone after them. Now Mounties are becoming huge, and that means they're saving those small clubs. They would have gone by the wayside if Mounties hadn't stepped in. But the same goes for Parramatta leagues. We've got to always be on the outlook for looking for opportunities that fit our criteria and go for those.
Okay, now I'm going to put each of you on the spot because I want you to just give me one answer to this. 2023, what are you most looking forward to?
Aside from a premiership. I think that's the answer from all of us, but let's go. I'm looking forward to Eels Lane opening up next year.
Oh, you've stolen my thunder. It makes
We can have a second, someone to seconding that.
No, but I think it's an opportunity for us to grow our membership further, and the offerings that will be given will be huge. So our membership manager, I think, is going to be run off her feet.
Yeah, and look, just to that point.
I think she's been challenged this year. Wait for it, girl.
And just to that point, as someone that I come to the club before the matches, and obviously after the matches is our podcast here. But I come here before the matches, and you've seen we've caught up down in Eels Lane. Like to pop in, grab a quick drink, and have a bit of a chat before going over for the start of the football. And Eels Lane grabs me because I just think having extended space and options there is a big plus.
A great opportunity for people to meet and gather before they go over there, and then when they've been over there, they can come back. And we need that extra space because, as you know, after a game, and especially if we've won, this place is just packed.
Yeah.
And you can't move, and we've got people queued outside, so the covered walkway is going to be a big bonus.
Yeah. And it kicks off the atmosphere of the day, doesn't it? When you have footy supporters there gathering, they're talking about the game, like you start to hear a bit of ribbing that's going on between, some rival supporters there, or just, people talking about what's coming up, some late mail that starts to drift through from, the TVs and what have you.
The fact that the game day experience happens well before you walk into CommBank Stadium is a real bonus.
Yeah.
Look, to be honest, it's hard for me to pick just one, so it's kind of everything that we've talked about. It's actually Eels Lane, as you've talked about, but it's just everything that we've been investing in and providing back to members. Being able to, on game day, have that, but as well, members being able to come in and just use the club the way they want to. And when we get Dural on board as well, being able to expand what we do up there, return that club to its former glory. I mean, all of the manifestation of all of that over the next 12 months will just be amazing for this club.
Well, Richard, Joy, Darren, Merry Christmas, first of all. I hope it's a great Christmas and New Year to you. Thank you for joining us today. And is there one final message you'd maybe like to give to our members and supporters out there?
Well, thank you for the last couple of years. So members of both the Eels and the Leagues Club have been very patient through COVID. So thank you for hanging in there and returning in 2022 in force. Thank you to the Cumberland Throw for all of your support of both organisations and the group in general. And thank you today for having the opportunity to come and catch up with us.
Always enjoyable.
Really appreciate what you do. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, we come in for the quick hug and kiss with you, Joy. That's always a big attraction.
Oh, look at yesterday Greg and I were down at Parramatta Mission, because we sponsor them, and the hugs were all around. It's just a bit embarrassing, but it was really great because Parramatta Mission they've got big issues because they're a community-based welfare support group, but we learnt yesterday they're going to lose part of their building because the reorganisation of Parramatta and the construction they want from Parramatta Square, they want a walkway right through to the water, and to me they're going to demolish half of the Lee Memorial Hall. Well, the Lee Memorial Church won't get hit, but where do these people go? And I think it's really important for Parramatta Leagues to be on their side and helping them.
Well, that's part of being
It's the
involved in the
community.
community. Yeah.
You've got to be in the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, just gratitude from me for partners like yourself, who are great supporters of both the football and the Leagues Club. Thank you to our members for their support. We hope we continue to get it. We hope we continue to get their feedback, and we can deliver on what they're after out of the club. And thank you to all the fans out there as well. I mean, we know we've got some of the most passionate fans in the league, and that just makes for an awesome experience for us.
Well, again, I'll finish as I always do. Merry Christmas to everyone, and go you Eels.
Absolutely.
One thing you missed. We need all our members to come on the 18th of January to vote at the EGM for the amalgamation with Dural.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll get some information out before that date.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Craig.